Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I'm going to work on an oldie but a goodie. This one is the Penn 650 SS skirted spool. It's an older reel. This one just doesn't seem right. It was sent in and well, it's just kind of sluggish. It's just really interesting. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and figure out why this reel is failing. Most of the time I get a reel in like this, it's kind of easy to figure it out, at least sense what's going on. In this case, I can't sense it much at all. Again, it's kind of hard to turn, so I don't know. Dried grease, I don't know if there's trapped line, I don't know. So we're going to use this video to do just that, try and do a problem diagnosis, see why it failed, and take corrective actions to make this reel keep on fishing for a long time to go. So one of the things we tested was that. The second one you want to test is the bail. Test the override, make sure that the anti-reverse override is working, which it is, and that gives us some information in terms of trying to work down through the analytics of determining what the real failure is. Well, if you like these kinds of videos, if you like reel service and repair, if you like learning about fishing reels, the histories, how they're made, how they come together, how they're serviced, then I would encourage you to subscribe to my channel. And as you do, I would also encourage you to use the notification button so that you see when I'm posting videos. I'm working on all kinds of reels. You're watching over my shoulder as I do that work, and all kinds of things happen. Well, this handle, in order to remove the handle, you have to remove the screw in the main gear. And in this case, this has got what I call a butterflied screw. It means that somebody has used a screwdriver that's too small for the slot, and they start to widen out the gap in that piece. You should always use a screwdriver that's appropriate for the width of the channel and the length of the channel. So in this case, that's a much better screwdriver to use, and you don't risk butterflying that out. Okay, well, that holds the main gear. So when we go to remove the main gear later, it won't be attached to that bearing there. The other part screws out, and this screws out by turning it opposite of the way that it turns to crank the reel, which is counterclockwise. I'm also noticing that we have a bent bail here. When the bail is hitting the handle, well, that's because it's been bent. So that needs to be reshaped a little bit, and we'll do that as part of the service. Right now what we want to do is kind of turn out the handle and see if we can't get a good look inside. Well, one of the things that I do when I service my reels is I put all the pieces and parts into a parts tray. I use the bottom of a fast food container. I do that so that I can know where those are when it's time to reinstall. You do not need to remove this cap. This cap does have a felt ring behind it, and that's to hold oil. So we're going to leave that there. You'll also notice I wear a glove. That's a protective glove. I like to keep greases and oils off my non-working hand when possible. And even though these gloves are good, they're a nitrate-based glove, I do have trouble with working these small pieces and parts with a glove on my dominant hand, my right hand. So if I could, I would, but right now I haven't found a nice way to do that, so I leave them off for now. All right, there's 3 screws that are holding on the side plate. I'm going to take those off right now. They're kind of a little sticky on the last part out. I don't understand what's the cause of that, but that's okay. So you want to remove the side plate, and then you can get a good look. And inside here, well, it's a little dirty, but other than that, it doesn't seem to be at issue. Let's spin it. Oh, we have issues here with the spin. One of the things you want to diagnose when you have issues with the spin, take the spool off and see. That's still tight. So I'm thinking right now what the issue may or may not be, but a good guess is that it's dried grease. Let's see what we can do to get this out of the side here. And this one I think is stuck on the gear side. Okay, so this one had a gear that was stuck in the race. So what I did was I took my time, shut the camera off, I went and got some penetrating oil, I soaked that down, and then just worked it, rocking it back and forth from the inside in order to get that out of there. So I don't know to what extent that may have been the cause of the issue. It certainly is not helping it when that bearing is stuck on there. But then I went and tested the bearing, and the inner race runs fine, and the outer race runs okay as well. But you know what? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace that bearing just to be on the safe side. Well, let's go ahead and get rid of all of this grease and white that's on here. And so much about your servicing of fishing reels has to do with inspecting, cleaning, making sure that all of the pieces and parts are in good condition, and replacing any of the worn pieces. And worn, usually it's the drag washers and the like that become subject to wear. Well, we cleaned the main gear. Now we want to check to make sure that all of the teeth are uniform, that there's no bends or chips or otherwise troublesome pieces. I'm going to leave that bearing off to the side for a moment. We'll come back and let's take a look at the crosswind block and the attach points. So this one has two attach points. They're screws. They hold a flat piece of metal in place, and that metal is going through a flat spot in the axle shaft. I've seen too many reels come in where people don't realize that the flat spot holds this metal piece, and they've installed this metal over the rounded edge of that axle shaft. And well, you can imagine what the effect of that would be on the performance of the reel. All right, we're going to pull that out. That's your flat shaft. It always helps me if I take the time while I'm removing them to clean it. You saw me clean that main gear. Now I just cleaned off the tie down. Now we can remove our axle shaft. That came out nice and easy, so that's not the cause of any performance issues. Place that into my parts tray. Now we have a crosswind block that's sitting on a stud, so let's bring that up and out. And I think we're starting to see there's a lot of shellacked and old greases on these pieces. That could be impairing the performance. And it feels like it's somewhat stuck there, so let's get that out of the way. Go back to my old friend, the penetrating oil. And I'm just going to use that as a degreaser at the moment. Put the reel down, we'll come over here, wipe down the crosswind block, get as much of that old grease off as we can. And I'm going to use a cotton swab to clean the channel here that also has a lot of old grease in it. This is the part of the crosswind block that's important because this is what's riding on the face of the oscillation or crosswind gear. We'll do the same thing here. If you let that penetrating oil sit for just a moment, it's going to be doing all the work by itself. You won't have to do much. And when I work on these pieces and parts, I like to use the least abrasive measures that I can. I don't really want to scar up or deface pieces and parts. Just using a pick here to get some of that stuff that's kind of hanging around the inside. We'll take all of that off. And then I'm going to use a hard brush now to just pull off any remainder that's on here. And the rest should wipe clean. Well, while we're doing this, if you have any questions on this reel or any reel in particular, maybe you want to know more about the Spinfisher series. It was Penn's first spinning reel series. Not this one, but they have what was referred to as the Penn Greenies. But if you want to learn a little bit more about the history of those reels, where these fit in, what's the advantage of a skirted spool versus the earlier editions, I'll leave those questions in the comment section. I will try to answer those for you. Last thing we want to do is get that old grease out of the center. You can see there's a lot of old grease in there. That's where a cotton swab comes in handy. Do the same thing here. Beautiful gears. Check the teeth, make sure that they're not clogged. Make sure that they're all uniform. If they are clogged, just go back to that hard brush, pull through the channels, and that will help you clean out any residual old dried greases that are in there. With that clean, we'll put that into the back of the wheel, and we're going to come over here now because we noticed that there was a lot of dried grease on the back end of that oscillation gear, so that means that the grease is dried in the case here as well. And again, we'll puddle that, and you can see we've got all kinds of stuff coming up right now. Just going to use a pick to just kind of accelerate the process a little bit, but I want to get all that old grease out of there so that it doesn't affect how that moves back and forth. So right now I think what we're seeing, we saw a stuck bearing, and we're seeing dried grease on a critical component, that oscillation gear, which certainly can slow down the performance and make it act erratic. All right, that's in good condition now. It's been nicely cleaned. So we're going to go up top now, and we'll keep working in terms of both problem identification. This is slow. This shouldn't be this slow. And I also sound like it's got a little bit of a noisy bearing in there too. So we're going to want to try and address both of those issues if we can. Now this one should have an American-based or US thread size. It does. It's the half inch. Now, of course, half inch is also a metric size that's close to that. But these were made before they switched the plants over to metrics in tooling. These were made in the good old USA in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. All right, the nut comes off, the rotor comes off, and we still want to figure out what's kind of going on here. This has a dual anti-reverse type of a system. One of them is the anti-reverse dog with the finger jointed, and when you use the lower switch, it will either allow it to operate or not. This is the off position, so you can spin the wheel backwards. There's also an on position. I'm noticing on this side that we have a spring that is probably getting in the way. I'm also noticing that there is an awful lot of metallics. This is like shaved brass. So this has probably been interfering in one way or another with the performance, and well, we're going to have to fix that. We'll go back to our penetrating oil, kind of flush that out before I start taking pieces and parts off. Just trying to get some of that metallic stuff off the case. Yeah, if I had to guess, there's something in here that's slowing that down. All right, well, let's take some of this off. Let's reset that spring there. That was an easy enough one to do. I don't know why that fell off, but it did. We're going to remove the screw here. That kind of looks like what's causing it. So I'm going to go to a schematic. My guess in this whole issue is that there's probably a washer that goes on top of this, but I can't say for certain. But we're going to continue with the take apart. Just like we said on that other screw, make sure you match the blade to the slot. Anything less than that is going to run the risk of you butterflying the core slot, and then, well, it will become pretty useless. This can come up now, and we will remove that. If you put this one, which is controlled by a lever here, if you put that one in the off position, you generally can remove this collar without removing the rest of this assembly. Now, I'm not sure I was clear when I was discussing this before. So the one that we just removed there is the one that's controlling the anti-reverse. This one is the anti-reverse without the noise. So when you put this one on, this will act as a click kind of a mechanism. Let's go ahead and take the 3 screws out here. So right now, because of the way that that was running a little bit rough, and because of the way that I'm seeing that metallic filings on this, I'm going to think that there might be a washer that's missing. And maybe that's missing from the last service, I assume, because I've seen the butterflied screw on the main gear, and because I've seen the filings and things like that. It's pretty obvious that the reel has been serviced. The question is, was it serviced properly, or did somebody lose a part along the way? I'm going to put that clip off to the side now. And this is the one that always makes you wonder whether you're going to be able to get that piece out or not. And in this case, we got it out. All right, let's continue with the case cleaning. There's a little bit of grease here that you can't get to with that gear installed, so I'll do the same thing. Go ahead and grab this, and I'm back on the side. Get behind the case and underneath it here. That's instead. Going to remove that big bearing. We'll do the same thing. A lot of this is kind of rinse and repeat type activity. We'll get that hard brush, pull through, making sure that all the channels are clean. Wipe the center of this. Now this is a shielded bearing, it's not a sealed bearing. So if you flood it with oil and just let it sit, that will do just fine. I do want to go back and look for this. I do want to get the schematic, and I do want to check to see if we're missing a washer on that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut the camera off for a moment, and well, in video time, we'll be right back. Okay, while we were away, I did a few things. I went and got the replacement bearing for the one that had the seized inner race. I cleaned up our pinion gear and our main bearing, and I did find out that, yeah, we do have a little spacer that will go on top of that stack. So that's not what was causing the metal filings, but we're gonna, I guess we'll find out a little bit more as we continue to go. One of the things that may have impaired the performance of this is that there's a lot of dirt and old greases underneath, and we'll take care of that. But this clearly here is what was the filings were coming from. We can feel that, and I'm not quite sure why that is, but I do know it is. Okay, I'm just going to take a moment here to just get the last of those metal filings off. It does concern me, and I'm not sure why it's happening, but it is happening. And we can reinstall. We've oiled the bearing. We put the spacer on there. We'll go ahead and take some grease, make sure that that gets applied liberally to the pinion gear. And we can work this back in. Seat the pinion gear into the hole. Then we have our little tie down. So just make sure that you've got this lined up now with the holes for the mounts. And then I like to use a little screw starter that I constantly thank Dick for sending in. It's a Klein Tools screw starter, and when I get into tight situations like this, it does me well. All right, we got to line those up again. And bring that down. So I'm not sure why I've got a grind there, but I do. And I'm going to test the anti-reverse dog next to make sure that that's square and doing what it should be doing. Just seems odd. And this is one of those cases where if reels could talk, they would tell you what's wrong with it. Since we don't have that luxury, Well, we just have to kind of go by ear and see what we can do. But clearly that's where the wear has been. All right, the dog is going to set on. Like that. I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to bring it to the flat side of the gear. We'll remove that post so that it's an easier mount. And we can line the hole up for the screw. Go into our parts tray, grab the screw. And let's bring that over now. So it always concerns me when I see something like filings. It just says something is not seated properly. And yet it's difficult to see when you go into the blueprint. This is the schematic for the reel. I was able to go out on the internet and get that from Mr. Parts. And well, it just it's telling me that whatever it was that was setting it up was certainly scoring it. All right. Let's go ahead and put the rotor back on. There is no additional part under the rotor. I did check that. Interestingly enough, the one that I pulled is actually an older version of it, but that's all right. It says this is going to seat right on it. So we'll take that and we'll take our nut. And we'll see if it's still difficult to turn. It's quite possible that something was not set properly. And just simply removing the pieces and parts, cleaning them, lubricating them, and putting them back on. Well, sometimes it just solves whatever that imbalance was in the reel. Let's tighten that and give it a whole different game. It's turning much easier now, so I'm not sure again quite what the issue was, but whatever it was seems to have gone away for now. All right, we have the replacement bearing on both sides, so let's continue with the install. So one of the things we noticed was there was a lot of dried grease. We took our time to clean it all. Now we're taking our time to re-grease and re-lube. We noticed we had a sticking or a frozen bearing on that inner race. And we showed you with a little bit of patience, a little bit of help from penetrating oil, and a little bit of luck, we were able to solve for that. Next up, we'll take our cleaned crosswind block, and we're going to use fishing reel grease here. Please only use fishing reel grease when you're servicing your reels. This happens to be Penn precision reel grease, and I'm not using that because this is a Penn reel. I'm using it because it's fishing reel grease. I really don't care what the brands are that you use. To me, they're pretty much all designed to help prolong the life of fishing reels, either because of the viscosity or their aversion to water or corrosion or salt, whatever. I'm not a chemist, so that probably sounds weird to those of you that are chemists. But regardless, I trust their work, and the work that I find is that, well, you need the greases to do that. All right, one of these bearings belongs in the side case over here. We're going to put that in. I'm going to put the main gear in now. Seat it properly. And then remember, this is the side that had this screw. That was butterfly, but I'm going to use that to hold the main gear in right now. And when you're reassembling, it's pretty much the reverse order that you took them out. Next up then is the axle shaft. We want to bring that through the top, behind that main gear. And now find that flat spot, because as I mentioned when we were taking this apart, I've seen folks that don't have the flat spot have it like this, where the rounded edge is facing forward, and somehow they've managed to take this and get it started on both sides and wrap it. Well, That leads to all kinds of problems, and that's probably why they wind up in my shop, because somebody didn't realize that, well, it installs this way. That kind of brings me to one of my suggestions that I normally include in every video, and that is to take pictures along the way before you install or disassemble the reel. Those pictures are invaluable when you go and you get stuck along the way. And this certainly would stick you. And I'm using that screw starter again to take the 2 screws that hold that flat bar in place to attach your axle shaft. So those go on next. And I don't like to finish the tightening with that screwdriver just because it's got 2 separate blades in it. I don't want to compromise those blades. So we can, right now we can take a spin and see what's going on here. Well, it's certainly working easier. And now hopefully with that new ball bearing on this side of the reel, it's going to make all the difference in the world. So we're going to take our case. While I have that case out, it's a good time to clean it. Go ahead and do that. Wipe that down. I have a scrubby pad with some rod and reel cleaner on it. That's what I've been using there. Go ahead. I'm going to insert the bearing into the case. Nope, actually, that bearing goes on the outside of the case. So let's put the case on next. And work on too many reels and too many variations to remember them all. So the 3 screws go on next. Again, use the right screwdriver for this. Tighten them all down. And normally if you have several screws, you want to alternate where you're tightening up and loosening. You don't want to go in a circular pattern or just kind of around the horn. You want to go kind of east, west, north, south. On 3 it doesn't matter. Here's your new bearing, goes in next. Snaps nicely into the case. Let's take the button for the one side that's going to close over the screw side. Let's take our button for this side. Remember, that's got that little felt piece in it. That's designed to hold oil to keep the bearing oiled, but it's also designed to keep the dirt out. So if you're missing it, go get it. All right. The handle goes on now. This screws on counterclockwise. We can give it a turn here. Well, other than that bell banging, that's a whole different piece. All right, let's show you what to do about this bail bang. What's happened is this one has gotten too low. So it's probably at some point, there it is, I wanted to find out where that was happening. At some point, this probably got compressed down. It's a simple fix. You want to bring this back, kind of hold the bail firm. You're going to use a channel lock pliers for that. And simply rebend it. This is a bail wire. Just kind of use your finger touch, bend it up a little bit. And now you'll notice when it comes over to that point, the bail is higher. Try and get this for your view. The bail is higher than it was before, and that's going to make the difference in why you won't get that kick. I'll tell you what, that's a whole lot better than it was. So I'm not sure it could be any of the 3 issues that we identified when we were doing this, but it could have been that frozen bearing on the shaft. It could have been all the grease and oils that have dried out inside the reel, or it could have been the spacer and the issues up top. Well, one last thing we want to do here, and that's to check your drag stack. Doesn't make any sense servicing the whole reel and leaving the drag stack unattended to. So I've removed all of them by removing a C-clip First of the drag washers is actually this hex washer that seats on the bottom and becomes the first seat for this Teflon washer, which goes in the bottom. Next up, we have two of these washers. They're round with a rectangular center. The first of those goes in. Now these are HT100 washers, the next two. You can put grease on them. I'm going to do that. I'm going to use Cal's Universal Dry Grease. You don't need that. If you have fishing wheel grease, that's fine. Once you grease the first one, make sure you can see the cross hatchings through the grease, and then take the hex washer next. I'll do that one more time with the second one. I just use my gloved hand as a tool to spread that grease around. If there's too much, in other words, there's globs on there, then go ahead and wipe it down with a paper towel so that you can see the cross hatching. I guess after a while, well, it kind of comes natural. Next and last piece then is to reinsert that little clip. Hold that clip. It's a spring and it can shoot out if you're not paying attention. All right, with that then, we're going to go ahead and put the spool back on. Take that opportunity here to kind of use that cleaner in that ring here. Just clean it up nicely. You can also do that on the button here. Well, if you have any questions on this reel or any reel, if you want to leave them in the comments section, I will try to answer those questions for you. It can be on all kinds of things. Maybe it's something that along this line when we were repairing this reel, or any of a number of things, including a reel that may not be shown. Maybe you're working on one and you're a little stuck. Okay, finish tightening down that nut. Trace it by hand, make sure that it's nice and tight. Let's give it a final test then. So we've got two things going on here. We've got an instant anti-reverse that we currently have in override mode. Switch that, and that anti-reverse will work. Then we have this one, which we have not engaged, but this is the click. Got it? So you have a double anti-reverse on this one when that click is engaged. If you want to go into silent mode, you switch that off. That disables that, but keeps the anti-reverse still working. We'll leave that on just because it's fun. Well, that's turning a whole lot easier than it was before we started. We reshaped the bales so that we got that out of the way. We're going to test that now to make sure that it fires, and it fires nice and easy. Now, we didn't service that. You don't have to as part of a normal service. You don't have to remove the bale spring and wires and all that other stuff. People, for some reason, think that you've got to take every piece and part off, and then I wind up getting them back on my desk because, well, they couldn't figure out how to put it back together again. Sort of a Humpty Dumpty. All right, well, that's it. We did a problem diagnosis. We found out that there's 3 probable causes for that. We talked a little bit about why each one could cause the issue. In our servicing, we've addressed each one of those. Most of it was cleaning and just resetting this and replacing a part, a worn bearing. So regardless of which one it was, we're now back to where we should be with that reel and the way that it's operating. And this one should last a long time to come. I want to take a moment to thank our first responders and essential personnel, our fire and police, and everybody who work hard to keep us safe. I do appreciate everything it is that you do. To everyone, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.